Yes. It's the Castworthy podcast, Castworthy crew. Two of the team is on tonight as El Jefe has bowling and E is E. um, I am EJ Stewart, the Savage, most days, and I'm joined here by the VP of Research.
What up?
Castworthy podcast can be found on most of your media listening platforms: Spotify, www.spreaker.com, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. VP of Research, man. Let's get right into it. We're having this special episode to discuss our president and the things swirling around in the news. And as our resident political connoisseur, we're going to let you take it away.
Yeah, man. So today was a big move by the Democrats in the House of Representatives after the story came out regarding Trump and possible corruption with the country of Ukraine. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, announced that she's authorized an impeachment inquiry to investigate whether or not they're going to move forward with articles of impeachment to try to get this president removed from office for corruption. So today was a big deal in politics. I mean, we've only had two presidents in the history of the country to actually be impeached. So, this thing that just shows you, 200 plus year old country, only two presidents have faced this process. So it's a pretty big deal,
Yeah. It's it's definitely shocking that it's only been two in this entire history. Says a lot about our political process, I guess, or just how things are swept under the rug or done, as I'm pretty sure some others probably could have been. But yeah, I mean, so Trump is under fire. And for those who are not really familiar with the impeachment process and what it means, what exactly is going down when that happens?
So essentially what happens is that a lot of people have the misconception that impeachment means removal from office, and that's not how it works. So basically, impeachment starts in the House, and they have their investigation, and then they write articles of impeachment. Think of the impeachment process as kind of like when we see things in the news in the justice system where there's a grand jury. So that kind of acts as a grand jury, and the articles of impeachment kind of serve as an indictment that you would see a prosecutor write. Now, if those articles of impeachment pass, then that indictment or the articles of impeachment move to the Senate side where there's a trial. And the senators in the United States Senate act as both like the courtroom and the jury. They listen to evidence, they listen to everything that's put out there, and then once it's all done, they vote in a similar way to how a jury would vote in a criminal trial. And then if there is a 2/3 majority for who votes yes for removal, then the president is considered convicted and removed from office.
So impeachment is pretty much the motion to make a motion, virtually like a motion to, start investigating the president and see what's going on. And then he virtually stands trial to some degree, I guess, based on what you surmised it. And you did that pretty well. What is the likelihood that we're actually going to see any traction from this motion?
So that question is the, $22,000 question or $60,000 question, however that saying goes.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the Republicans in Congress in both the House and the Senate are pretty much in lockstep behind Trump. And it's hard to see them break away from him to say we support removing him from office. And already we've seen Republicans like Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, and Matt Gaetz from Florida, that are already coming out with statements, basically, saying that this whole process is bullshit, et cetera, right? Now, with that said, once the Congress starts to investigate, and even though they've had a ton of investigations going on since the Democrats took control of Congress, Trump has been stonewalling them. They sent subpoenas, and Trump has been fighting every single subpoena. But with impeachment, the Congress's powers to investigate is at its maximum when they go into the impeachment process, because impeachment is the sole purview of Congress. And so when they go in and say, we need to see documents based, on this or that, and Trump says, well, I'm going to use executive privilege to shield these documents, they're going to go to court, and then the courts are likely going to decide you have to turn over the documents, because they're exercising their constitutional powers right now to determine whether or not the president should be removed from office. So with that said, once they start reviewing, documents and testimony from witnesses, et cetera, you could see things that are damaging to the president start to come out, and maybe that support that he has from Republicans, where they've been in lockstep with him, you could see that start to fade. And that's essentially what happened with Nixon. Nixon has super high approval ratings, and when he was in the impeachment process, he was actually never impeached. A lot of people think he was, but when they were going to go for the vote, he knew he was going to be impeached, and Republicans went to him and said, look, dude, it's not looking good. You got to step aside. And then that's when he resigned from office. But before that happened, Republicans were in lockstep with Nixon. He had vast support amongst the citizens in the country. And once that evidence started coming out and people started to see our president is a crook, that support started to fade. It started to go lower and lower and lower. And the Republicans in Congress knew, we can't go with this dude. We got to cut him loose. And they cut bait.
So thinking of the country and that timing of it, would you? I would kind of assume, or I would kind of say to a degree, that the country was a lot different morally, and the culture and the climate of things that was accepted. While Nixon has done a lot of foul things in relation to culture and ethnicity, to minorities, etc. I wouldn't say that he was outright this bold and this way that Trump is. Do you think that due to the times, due to the culture, due to the country just seemingly being to some degree at its lowest when you're talking about the supporters of Trump, do you see that all of that possibly happening, or does he somehow muscle his way over the party and what they are concerned and what they want?
I'm kind of torn on this question. And the reason why I say that is, like you said, with Nixon, it was a different time, right? And back then you had a couple of major newspapers, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, things like that. And, you had three news networks, CBS, NBC, and ABC. And now you can essentially get whatever news you want to hear from wherever you want to hear it, right? And so with the existence of wing media and Fox News and talk radio, etc., they're going to be on Fox News basically saying, this is bullshit, this is bullshit, this is bullshit. And you're going to have the rank and file voters who are going to be telling their member of Congress or their senator, you can't support this shit, or I'm going to vote you out because this is bullshit, regardless of what comes out. We've seen during the Muller investigation of Russian collusion that anything that came out regarding Trump and his involvement with the Russians was basically brushed aside by the Republicans. So I'm not sure if whatever the House finds that the public sees, I'm not sure if it's able to penetrate that bubble of support that Trump has. But at the same time, the founders of the country put impeachment in for a reason. There's basically two ways to remove a president. If the president comes in and you don't like the way he is running the country, you don't like the policies that he's passing. After his 4 years is up, you have the opportunity to vote him out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you have a president who is acting outside of his authority and who is essentially a criminal, the founders also put in a mechanism to remove that person from office, and that is this impeachment process. And so I think if the Democrats would have allowed Trump to get away with the shit that he's already done so far, then what president is impeachable if this president is not impeachable?
And so looking back to Clinton, I want you to try to shed some light on what made that possible. What was the nail in the coffin for him? What was the culture of the country like? How did that happen seemingly to Clinton so easily?
For Clinton, the thing that happened to him is that he was under constant investigation for everything. And what started off as an investigation of a land deal, which was called Whitewater, it was a land deal that he did when he was still in Arkansas before he became president. That deal started being investigated. And then that investigation turned into an investigation of sexual harassment and things like that. Fast forward a few years, and they find Monica Lewinsky. Now, during Bill Clinton's interview on whether or not he did anything with Lewinsky, he lied and said that he had no sexual relations with her, and that was a lie. And so, by lying to federal investigators, that he basically perjured himself, and that was obstruction of justice. And so they charged him, or they didn't charge him with that because there's a memo in the Justice Department that says you can't charge a sitting president with a crime. So they basically put all the evidence out there. And coincidentally, on that kind of a side note, one of the people who helped write the Starr report that they used to write articles of impeachment against Clinton is Brett Kavanaugh, the guy who Trump recently put on the Supreme Court. But yeah, so they brought articles of impeachment against Clinton for obstruction of justice and perjury. And what essentially happened there is that the country was with Clinton still, and they said, yeah, he lied, but he lied about sex. And I don't think that that's a big enough crime to remove the president from office. And since the country wasn't there, the Democrats, who had the majority in the Congress at that time, voted to not convict him and remove him from office. Now, in hindsight, I actually believe that that was a mistake. And the reason why I say that is that the president, he has, moral obligations to the country. And we have to be able to trust the president and believe that what he's telling us is the truth. And the reason that that is important is that while lying about sex seems like something trivial and, who cares about what he does in his personal life? And I actually don't, if him and his wife are cool with it, then whatever. Right. But at the same time, what happens when the president comes to us and says, hey, country X did this, and I need to send your fellow citizens into this theater of war to put their lives on the line because of this? We need to be able to believe him. And by not impeaching Clinton, I think that we basically said as a country, it's okay for the president to lie to us. We have to judge how big the lie is, but essentially it's okay. And it's not okay. The president, not only is the chief executive of the country, but he's also kind of like a moral leader, not necessarily in a spiritual sense like you would expect of a pastor, but he's the leader of our country. He represents us on the world stage, and he needs to be able to stand above the fray and have good moral character. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. And I mean, it also kind of sets precedence for the future. It virtually kind of shows the allegiance of a party and our congressmen and women in their and kind of what their morals or what they value over truth and justice versus, saying we really want just to keep power. We want to keep this president in. We like him. This is our guy. It kind of showed a bad light for Congress then. And I mean, if that anything is telling for the future now, we can almost assume, based on a lot of things that you are already saying and addressing, that the Republicans are going to do the same thing, which
Mm-hmm.
is it's extremely scary. But it's like this guy's had a lot of evidence stacked up against him at this point in time. And I guess I'm trying to figure out what it might be that, Nancy Pelosi has found that we didn't see before, that they didn't know about before, because the reports were there. The evidence has been there. I'm guessing, I'm just wondering, is it just the potential collusion with Ukraine? Like, what do you think was the driving factor? What do you think, made them say, go for it, let's go? Like, what do you think?
Well, I honestly think that they've always wanted to go, right? But with the Russia stuff, it wasn't really there. You had a lot of A, and we saw a lot of C, but we just didn't have B. B just seems like a lot of circumstantial stuff. Now, looking at it, it looks like, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. It's a fucking duck. But it wasn't that simple. And I think the Democrats made a mistake. And I count myself in this group of people who put too much faith in Robert Mueller.
Mm,
And we essentially said Mueller is the end all be all, and just wait for Mueller, just wait for Mueller, wait for Mueller. And then when Mueller came out, he basically said, yeah, there was some stuff there, but I'm not going to give you any of my opinions. Here's read my report and do whatever you're going to do. And then on top of that, you have a person like Trump and Bill Barr, the attorney general, who says, well, we're not going to let you read the full report. And so we don't really have everything. The stuff that's in the report that could give us the B that I mentioned earlier, we don't have it. So impeachment for the Russia stuff kind of fell by the wayside once this Mueller report came out. In this situation, we have a government in the Ukraine situation. We have a whistleblower who is essentially saying, hey, I was involved in these talks between Trump and the Ukrainians, and there was some shit that I saw that troubled me. Now, we haven't seen the whistleblower report yet or even heard from the whistleblower, so everything that we've heard about the situation is based on media reports. But the media reports mean that Trump pressured the Ukrainian president 8+ times to open an investigation into his political rival, Joe Biden, to help advantage him in the 2020 election. And this is essentially what the Russians did. They basically dropped dirt on his political rival and Hillary Clinton to help him in the 2016 election. But in this case, it
mhm.
seems like Trump is actually asking for it. And if you don't do it, we're not going to give you this money and military assistance to help you fight off the Russians who are trying to do shit in your country. And that is easier to explain. It's easier to see. It makes more sense to people. It doesn't involve Facebook ads and things on Twitter and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah,
Smoke and mirrors, these things that could be easily uh, claimed as
exactly. This
bullshit.
thing here is like more digestible. The Ukrainians want American money for military assistance. Trump says you need to investigate Biden for me, or you're not going to get the money. Quid pro quo. As simple as that. You do this for this. And with the Russian thing, it was, even though it kind of seemed like that as well, it was more moving parts. It was more complex. Therefore, it wasn't as easy to digest. And I think that's why it seems like people in politics, especially on the Democratic side, who weren't there on impeachment are like, okay, I'm there now because this is fucking crazy. And like I said earlier, if this president isn't impeachable, then what, describe to me the fictional president that you can come up with that is impeachable.
Right. So, in what has been what has been the feel from the Fox side, from the red side? I mean, you said there have been two Republicans that have pretty much are kind of lockstep with Trump at this point. But what are the citizens? What is the tone of the culture of the citizens and what they think, those that may have supported him?
For right now, from what I'm seeing, is people who are diehard Trump supporters are basically saying the same thing he's saying. This is bullshit. You have Trump derangement syndrome. You didn't get him on Russia, so now you're just trying something else. And they think that this is going to make him get reelected, et cetera, et cetera. From Republican members of Congress, there have been a few that have come out and basically said the same things. This is bullshit. You're just trying to get Trump on anything. But the majority of them are kind of keeping their powder dry because they're not sure where this thing is going. Because they know these people aren't idiots, right? They know that Trump lies on the regular, and they know this guy is pretty much corrupt, but they don't know what's there. So it seems like they're not sticking their neck out to say this is bullshit, but they're also not saying, yeah, I think we got to get this guy out of here. They're kind of in wait and see mode. Let's see what comes out, and then I'll make my statements based on what I see.
So it kind of, and going back to the Mueller report, it kind of has me questioning: was it a failure on his part? Was it what he was looking for? What could they have done better in that situation?
I think where the Mueller report messed up at, and where people messed up at in putting their faith in Mueller, is that Mueller is an institutionalist, right? He believes in the rule of law, and he believes in the way that these institutions function, right? And I've said this on a previous podcast before, but a lot of things that the president does and doesn't do, there aren't really laws governing these things. They just don't do it because it's not a good look, right? So in the past, you don't see presidents appointing their family members to run government agencies. Yeah, Kennedy appointed his brother.
The Kennedys, yeah.
Yeah, he appointed his brother to be the attorney general.
But he's a lawyer.
Yeah, but since then, that hasn't happened because it's not a good look, right? And you don't see presidents who have businesses continue running those businesses. Like Jimmy Carter had a very successful peanut farm when he became president. And I believe he either sold it or put it in a blind trust, so that way he couldn't ever be accused of setting agricultural policy for the country that would benefit his peanut farm. Right. George Bush, both Bushes, Barack Obama, these people had millions of dollars, and they took their money and put them into blind trust, so that way they couldn't be accused of, making economic policy that benefits them, right? But in this president, he doesn't do that. He just says, fuck that. I'm going to hire my family. My daughter works in the White House. So does my son-in-law. And I'm going to continue running my businesses. I'm going to have the U.S. government spend money in my businesses, et cetera, et cetera. And
as
so
I discussed a couple pods ago with the contractors overseas.
Right. And so I said that to say this, when you talk about Mueller, is that here you have an institutionalist, right? And so I think Mueller went into this situation thinking, yeah, we're going to ask the president to see some documents and to interview some people. And because, presidents just always cooperate, he's going to say, okay, cool. And Trump was like, fuck that. You want to talk to anybody here? You want any documents? Send me a subpoena. And then when you send me the subpoena, I'm going to fight it all the way tooth and nail. I'm not giving you anything. And now you have an institutionalist versus a guy who says, here's your subpoena and I'm going to wipe my ass with it. Right.
Right.
And I think that was the problem with Mueller. Whereas if you have somebody who says, yeah, this guy's the president and I'm going to respect the office, but I'm going in here like a normal prosecutor would go against someone who we believe committed a crime. And we're going to
But
have
is it ever going to be, I mean, could it ever really truly be that way? I mean, based on the tradition, based on the office, based on, America just, having guys that are institutionalists that want to protect, the shield, for lack of better words. Would we have ever really had someone truly to do that?
Well, that's what happened in the Clinton case, but also what was different with Clinton was that they had a law that allowed for an independent investigator. So this was a person in Ken Starr who was appointed by the courts, and he didn't have anybody overseeing him except the courts. And that's, excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't know if you heard that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how we ended up going from a land deal in Arkansas to sex with interns, was because you had an independent prosecutor who was able to go wherever he wanted to go, right? So that law expired in 2000, and the Congress thought Ken Starr went too far, so they didn't renew it. So they got rid of that law and then wrote a regulation in the Justice Department that allowed for the appointment of a special counsel, which was what Mueller was. Under the special counsel regulation, the attorney general is in charge of the special counsel, and the attorney general is the one who sets the scope of the investigation. So people always ask, how come Mueller didn't go after Trump's tax returns? He may well have saw something in his investigation that said, we need to look at these tax returns. But he would have had to gone to the attorney general to say, hey, I need permission to go get the tax returns. And if the attorney general said no, then that's it.
So essentially, I mean, it's safe to say, and I hate to say this, I hate to sound like the pessimist, but it's kind of safe to say, or leaning towards the assumption that I'm gonna have. It's kind of safe to say this guy's pretty insulated. He's really like the Teflon Don of presidents at this point. Or do we really have a shot to get through this, get a chink in this armor?
I would say I'm largely in agreement with that statement, that it seems like this guy is Teflon. Like he said during the campaign, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it, right? And part of that is that the founders, when they wrote the Constitution, they prepared for someone like Trump, right? And so they put in an electoral college that says we might have somebody who's insanely popular and they could win the election, but they shouldn't be president. So we're going to put this electoral college in place because the average Joe citizen probably doesn't know what's good for them, right? Which is why we have this bullshit system in the electoral college. However, you have an instance where Trump doesn't win the popular vote, but wins the electoral college. The electoral college, who has the legal authority to not vote for Trump, still votes him in, even though he is insanely unqualified for the position, right? So they saw Trump coming, but the system didn't hold. The founders also said it's possible that we could have a president who doesn't care about the country and only cares about himself and is breaking the law, et cetera, et cetera. And we need to put in a mechanism to be able to remove that president from office, which is the impeachment process. What the founders did not see was a Congress who is willing to cede their power to the president and not check him, which is what the Republicans are doing in the case of Trump. So they didn't see that coming, and I mean, these guys can't see the future, right? But they try to do the best they can to put rules in place to check the presidency. But those rules only can go as far as the Congress is willing to go to enforce them.
Yeah. Yeah. Scary. It's super scary and adds more context to the need for revision of our political system and the things that were written over 200 years ago. Speaking towards the election and what this may mean, have our political candidates on the Democratic side, have they been talking about this? Have they been gearing up to utilize this, or because this race is got so many people and they're trying to gain footage, is this something that they're gonna be mum on, or what have you been hearing so far from the candidates?
So almost all of the candidates on the Democratic side have endorsed impeachment. Biden hasn't endorsed impeachment, but he said today in a he had a press conference today where he said if the Trump administration didn't turn over the stuff from the whistleblower, then he thinks they have to move towards impeachment. But they've already moved towards impeachment anyway, so I'm not really sure where he is on that. But most of the other candidates have endorsed impeachment. As far as if they can use it, I would say no. And the reason why I say no is that impeachment, like we talked about earlier, has only happened a handful of times in the entire history of the country. So it's a very big deal. And impeachment freezes the news cycle. So today, all the news today has been impeachment. This week is the United Nations General Assembly. So you have the presidents or prime ministers of all the countries in the world coming to New York to address the United Nations on whatever. Trump gave his speech today, and his speech was actually a pretty blistering speech against Iran, where he talked about if Iran doesn't do this or do that, we might be forced to go to war with them. That speech wasn't even covered because impeachment basically sucks all of the oxygen out of the news cycle. And so, Elizabeth Warren may have a plan for this or for that. Bernie may be talking about this. Biden's talking about that. It's not going to break through because it's going to be all impeachment all the time. So I would say that the race for 2020 on the Democratic side is essentially frozen right now while this impeachment thing is happening. And once this thing kind of moves along, then the political race for 2020 will probably pick back up.
Interesting. And very interesting, especially in the sense of what it might do for these candidates that are still in the race, maybe not as popular as the others, but it's kind of interesting how that could potentially affect them.
Mm-hmm.
So going forward, what are we going to be looking for? What are we watching for? What are we waiting for? What are we hoping for? What do you think going forward?
So in the immediate future, what we need to look for is on Wednesday of this week, the White House is going to release a transcript of the call that Trump had with the Ukrainian president back on, I think it was like July 25th or something like that. They're going to release an unredacted transcript of that call. Now, obviously, if Trump is going to release this transcript, then I'm pretty sure it's not going to have anything bad in it, right? But the transcript is not the issue. The issue is whatever the whistleblower raised in their complaint, because when the process is that the whistleblower goes to the inspector general for the intelligence community and gives the complaint. The inspector general has 14 days to review it. And if they find the complaint to be serious and credible, they forward it to the DNI, which is the Director of National Intelligence. That person then reviews it and has 7 days to turn it over to Congress. All of that happened except for the DNI turning it over to Congress. Now, the Inspector General reviewed this person's complaint, and they found the complaint to be, quote, credible and serious. The reason that that is important, and the reason why I said quote on that, is because in whistleblower law, that is actually a term of art to mean that this Inspector General, who was appointed by Trump, by the way, reviewed this person's and said, this thing is serious and credible, what this person is alleging. And we need to get this in the hands of Congress. So that already tells you that this isn't some shit that this person who maybe worked at the CIA was like, oh, I don't like Trump. I voted for Hillary. Fuck this guy. So I'm going to make some shit up. Even if they did that, this person who's in this office, who Trump put there, reviewed this complaint and said, something's up here. We need to get it to Congress. And then the Trump administration is blocking Congress from getting it. So that's why I say the transcript of the call doesn't matter. We need to see the whistleblower complaint, and we need to hear from the whistleblower. Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, he said that he's been in contact with the whistleblower's lawyer, and they're trying to work out some negotiations to get that person to be able to testify before Congress. That could happen this week, maybe next week. So those are the things in our immediate future. Long term, I think we got to just kind of see what happens with documents that the Congress requests, subpoenas that they send out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then once they've done the complete investigation, we see if they make up articles of impeachment and then how they vote on them and see where it goes from there.
It's all very interesting. And, it's just funny to me that, a country that has been so patriotic in the past, it's kind of sad to a degree to see that the culture, the climate, I guess, is so supportive of this guy because of the racism he invokes and how he epitomizes the white male fear of losing the country. It just shocks me that, this country has fallen this far. Largely, you would think, just as patriots, we would be condemning this guy. And it's just kind of scary. It's kind of scary. Kind of scary. But yeah, man, you have anything else on this thing?
I think we pretty much covered everything. I guess I would just say, stay tuned to your news. Definitely check us out on the podcast. I'm pretty sure we're definitely gonna not necessarily talk about this every cast, but we're gonna stay on it.
Right.
And we just gotta kind of see where things go, man.
Yeah, I'm glad Pelosi did it. I'm glad she moved forward. Really skeptical on what's gonna happen, but yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. 2020 is around the corner, and I've voiced this before. I'm not too excited about our candidates right now. I don't know which way the country will go, but this guy has to go, man. Before we get into war, before anything crazy happens, this guy needs to go, man. And this was one step in seemingly 1,000 more to go. So
I agree with you. I'm right there with you, man.
Yep. Good job, VP. And I don't have the theme music, but this has been a Castworthy special episode. I'm EJ the Savage, and VP, take us out.
Hey, we appreciate you guys tuning in again for the special episode of Castworthy on this breaking news impeachment night. And as always, we thank you guys for rocking with us and choosing to listen to us. You can follow us on any of our social media at Castworthy, on Instagram at Castworthy_podcast. And you can listen to our podcast pretty much anywhere that you can get podcasts: Apple Podcast, Spotify, www.spreaker.com. Search for Castworthy. And again, we appreciate you rocking with us, and we'll talk to you in the next one.
Yes, sir. Peace.